Alright, in this video, we want to take a look at nationalism. But before we can really understand what nationalism is or how we got to the point where people started believing in nationalism, we need to go back and sort of understand where we are as a country politically. And in order to understand that, we need to kind of take a look at our timeline and our first 5 presidents, because taking a look at our first 5 presidents really sort of explains where politics are when we get to the period of time when people become very nationalist, when they really love their country. So let's go back in time just a little bit to 1788. That's just a few months after the Constitution is written. It is signed, it is ratified by the states. The Constitution creates the office of the presidency, and there's an election held. George Washington becomes the first president of the United States of America. He is going to be reelected in 1792. He's going to serve a total of 8 years. George Washington is going to decide to walk away, and he is going to give his farewell speech at the end of his second term. And in his speech, he urges Americans not to develop political parties. But unfortunately, no one really listens to him. A party starts to develop within people who work for George Washington. They become known as the Federalists. And even though George Washington never really joins a political party, he sort of aligns himself with the Federalists, even if he doesn't do it on purpose. All of his friends are Federalists. He's very influenced by the guys who are going to start the Federalist Party. And so, even though George Washington is not a Federalist, he sort of takes the side of the Federalists. And the people who don't really like the Federalists, who want to be different from them, they are the anti-Federalists. And they eventually develop into their own political party, and they take on another name. They become the Democratic Republicans. And so we have this system where we have 2 different political parties that develop sort of during George Washington's administration, his time as president, but they definitely develop after he leaves. And the second president of the United States is going to be John Adams. John Adams is going to claim a political party. He's going to be part of the Federalists. He and Alexander Hamilton pretty much start the party, and he's going to be the first president that is going to consider himself a Federalist. And he's also going to be the last, because John Adams is not going to be reelected. So he's elected in 1796. He becomes the second president. He takes over for George Washington, and he doesn't really do a great job. So he's not reelected. When we get to the election of 1800, instead of John Adams being reelected, Thomas Jefferson is going to take over. And Thomas Jefferson is not a Federalist. Thomas Jefferson is a Democratic Republican. It's the opposite of a Federalist. And he is going to be reelected in 1804. He's going to serve a total of 8 years. And after Jefferson serves as the third president of the United States, James Madison takes over as the fourth president. He will also be a Democratic Republican. He will sort of carry on those ideas, policies that Thomas Jefferson started. He will be reelected in 1812. He will also serve a total of 8 years. And then after James Madison leaves office, after winning 2 elections, the election of 1800 and the election of 1812, James Monroe is going to come along. He is also going to be a Democratic Republican, and he's going to really be the last true Democratic Republican president. So there will be 3 Democratic Republicans. They will all serve 8 years, so they're all reelected. And James Monroe is going to be reelected in 1820. And what we're going to see is the Federalists start taking a lot of losses. So Adams is the first, last, and only president from the Federalist Party, but that doesn't mean they didn't keep trying. They lost the election of 1800. John Adams loses that election. And then the Federalist Party tries again in 1804, and their candidate loses again in 1808. Candidate from the Federalist Party loses again to the Democratic Republicans. It happens again in 1812. It happens again in 1816. And by the time we get to 1820, the Federalist Party doesn't even really have a candidate to run. And so James Monroe, when he's reelected in 1820, he doesn't even really have anyone in an opposite political party to run against. And so when we get to the election of 1824, we're going to see a problem with not having an opposite party. Start to see people within your own party start to go against each other. But as we go from 1800 all the way to 1825, one single party controls the presidency. And as we get towards the end of this time period, it becomes known as the era of good feelings. Because people are getting along at this time, and they're starting to develop this sense of pride in the nation. So James Monroe becomes the 5th president. He takes office in 1817. He's going to also serve for 8 years until 1825. And when he takes office in 1817, the United States is just coming out of the War of 1812. The War of 1812 lasted from 1812 to about 1815. So when he takes office, it's just a few years after the war had ended. And the war had made several people famous. 2 of the people that became the most famous from the War of 1812 were 2 generals, one known as William Henry Harrison and the other Andrew Jackson. They both won great battles for the United States during the War of 1812. They helped the United States get that victory, and so they've become very famous in the years just after the War of 1812. People have a lot of pride in these guys, and they are known as war heroes. And both guys are going to go on to become the president later on. And the part of the reason why both guys become president is because they are so loved by the people because of their involvement in helping defeat the British. People start to develop this sense of pride in the country. It becomes known as nationalism. People have this common identity now. People are proud to be from the United States. The United States has now defeated Great Britain, the biggest, most powerful empire in the world, and people are very proud of that. James Monroe is generally regarded as a pretty good president. He oversaw expansion, so the United States became a lot bigger during James Monroe's presidency. He oversees a treaty that adds Florida back to the United States as a territory, and he also sees 3 new states develop: Alabama, Mississippi, and Illinois. So the United States is getting bigger, People have more pride in their nation. And right before James Monroe leaves office, he establishes what's known as the Monroe Doctrine. And this is just basically a message to all of the countries of Europe, to these major empires. It's a message to stay out. Stay out of America. The United States has proved in the War of 1812 that we can defeat a mighty empire like Great Britain, and we are now expanding west. We are establishing more territory. We are becoming a bigger nation. And so we start off in the late 1700s as a very poor nation, just coming out of the American Revolution. And now, as we've moved into the 1800s and we've made our way into the 1820s, the United States has become an independent and powerful nation, which is not afraid of any other country around the world. And James Monroe was definitely not afraid to tell everyone that and to state that to the world with the Monroe Doctrine.